Sam Parker. Today is National Restart a Heart Day. I don't suppose many of you know, but 30,000 people have a cardiac arrest in the UK every year, which takes place outside of hospitals. And unfortunately, the survival rate for those poor people is only 1 in 10. If this were to happen to you and you came across somebody who wasn't breathing, would you know what to do? Many of us, I think, would say the answer is no, which is very, very worrying. I'd like to introduce Becki Coombe from the Learn 2 group. Hello, Becki.
Hello.
Becki delivers first aid training. She's also a volunteer with the Warwickshire Lowland Search and Rescue and also a volunteer community first responder with West Midlands Ambulance Service. And I'm just going to ask Becki a few questions, which I hope will help us all. So, Becki, could you tell us what would you suggest we do if we came across somebody, be it somebody in our own home, one of our loved ones, or we're out shopping, we came across a person who wasn't breathing? What would be the best way that we could help them safely?
Absolutely, the first thing is make sure you are safe, because if you're not safe, then you can be a casualty as well. But then after that, it is really important to make sure that professional medical help is coming, because there is only a certain amount of stuff that a bystander can actually do. When an ambulance comes, they usually have a defibrillator. I'm going to talk about those in just a moment. But they also have other kinds of drugs like adrenaline and things as well. So it's not just, a goodwill and lots of pushing on the chest that's actually going to get them, hopefully, to actually be breathing again. We really need the professionals. And the advice is actually to ask one person to call for help, and if they go away to call for help, ask a second person to as well, to make sure that someone's coming. Now, I know that you wanted particularly to go over defibrillators. Sometimes they're abbreviated to AEDs, which is automated external defibrillators. They are amazing. Hopefully, one day there will be a law that says if you need a fire extinguisher, you need a defibrillator. That's the sort of way it would be lovely to actually go. So hopefully, with the power of our what we can see, you're going to be able to see how we use a defibrillator, because they are super duper easy. So a defibrillator is around about this size. This is only a trainer one. And what happens is that as soon as you open it up, I've not put the power on this because it's going to be a little bit distracting when we're just zipping through it. As soon as you open it up, it will actually start talking to you. It will tell you to put the pads on the body. And on the pads, it actually has a picture of where they need to go. So one of the pads will go to the side of the body. You should be able to sort of see whereabouts that is roughly. And then and then the other pad will go to the top of the chest on the opposite side. And what it's trying to do is to see if there's any circuit of the oxygenated blood going around the heart and then between the two wires. If the defibrillator can detect that it is possible to shock them, that it is possible for that heart to be restarted, then it will say shock required. And it will give you a countdown and it will tell everybody to move away, and then it will have a flashing button to press and it will actually shock the person. Now, here's the amazing thing. There has never, ever, ever, ever been a case of anybody being hurt by a defibrillator. There's never been a case of any person who's a casualty having any worse effects or anything like that. So it is absolutely the way to go to try to use one if you can.
Okay. So you're not likely to do more harm than good because you've never used a defibrillator before?
It's impossible, because if this person is not breathing at the moment, the worst that can happen is they can continue to not breathe. All you are doing is trying to use a piece of equipment that is designed exactly for that purpose to try to start them breathing again. So it's so hard to be brave to do it, I've got to say, but that's what it is really. It's down to bravery more than anything.
Okay, thank you. That's really, really useful information. So if you were on your own with somebody, say I was in my home with my husband and he had a cardiac event, would I leave him to go and find a defibrillator, or would I be best staying with him and trying to do CPR myself?
Not necessarily leave him to find a defibrillator, but definitely leave him to get help. So if you're on your street, then knock on any door you can, scream as loud as you can, whatever it may be. The good news is that, especially in West Midlands, where we are for the ambulance service, they, if there is a category 1, which means it's life-threatening, they will send 2 ambulances and also an officer in a car as well. So you are absolute highest priority, and the time it takes to get to a person is, next to nothing in terms of, location and that kind of thing. So you'll be the absolute highest priority. So if you've got somebody who started CPR, amazing, because that means that the heart is still beating blood. You're actually doing that for them artificially. If somebody then comes with a defibrillator because they found one nearby, amazing. There's a possibility that it might have been able to jolt that heart back into a rhythm. So definitely leave somebody to go get help and make sure help is on the way. Get the heart starting again as soon as possible. Defibrillator is absolutely amazing if you can get one, and then hopefully the professionals will arrive.
Okay. I've noticed where I live, in my village, that we've got a number of defibrillators. How do you, if you haven't actually spotted them, as I have, how do you find out where your nearest one to you is? Because you might, even if you can't go yourself, you might be able to send, like you say, a neighbour to go and get one.
Absolutely. So, for example, my street know that there's one in my car, so they would be able to contact me. My village has got 2 in the village as well, so a bit local knowledge is really good. But what you will find is that county to county, there will be some kind of like registers. Now, registers are only as good as people who do actually register their AEDs. So actually, if you are an organisation that has an AED, then register it. That would be amazing. You can register it with the British Heart Foundation. You can register it with the ambulance service. You can register it with the Good Samaritan Act, if you've heard of that. And also from different counties, they have got their own sort of registers and lists as well. So Wales has got one, Yorkshire's got one, West Midlands has got one. So if you do Google and say local, where are the defibrillators in West Midlands, you'll find a website where that is. So it's quite a hidden entity, isn't it? We don't really think about it, but there are sort of registers out there, which is good.
Well, I'm just very conscious, having known people who have suffered cardiac arrests at home, and unfortunately both died from them, that it's something you always think will never happen to you or your loved ones until, of course, it does. And if you don't have this knowledge and you're not prepared, then you're probably in that terrible situation of, I know I would be panicking and not really knowing what to do and not really being helpful to anybody. Where can people go to get information on the best way to do CPR, particularly at the moment, hands-on CPR until a defibrillator can be found? What are the best sites perhaps people could look to update their own knowledge of this?
So when we post this video, I'll post a link for an animation, which is really quite nice and straightforward. There is one thing to think about with COVID. With COVID, we do not go near the mouth at all, and that's the ambulance service as well. So we don't lean down to listen to any breaths, and we don't do any mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. In fact, what we do is if we have a towel or something like that, we would actually put it over their mouth so that there's actually no airborne particles moving. And you might think that that's a little bit cruel, but actually we don't want another person to then become in danger themselves. So with the post, I will post a link for the CPR that's in COVID times and then a link for CPR that's in non-COVID times as well, because we do know that breaths and compressions are better than just compressions.
Okay, because I know some of the videos I've seen don't show breaths at all, even pre-COVID. Is that because it puts some people off?
Pretty much exactly that. Now, first aid is amazing because it just keeps getting made simpler and simpler and simpler, which I love, because we want to encourage people that are bystanders to get involved. If you can get that heart pumping oxygen, brilliant. Somebody can bring a defibrillator, amazing. The ambulance turns up, they can carry on. What's the most important thing is this heart to be beat, and that's what happens when we're doing the compressions on the chest.
Okay. Something I've often thought about is my understanding, and you might correct me here, is that defibrillators aren't that expensive, particularly relative to the amount people might spend on their wine intake or even just a small family holiday or a weekend break. And yet they could be totally the difference between life and death. And it's something that's crossed my mind. I have to say I haven't acted on it as yet, but why don't more of us actually have one in our own home?
I think before we all rush out and buy one, I think we need to think, do we need one? So, for example, you said you've got a couple in your village, I've got a couple in my village, so I know where those are. So actually, let's take that time to know where they are. Many organisations have got them and will use them on members of the public, so that's fantastic. And it's not really unless you're in a high risk category that you might consider having a defibrillator. So it's not expensive for example, a small organisation, but maybe the day when all homes have got fire blankets and fire extinguishers, that's when maybe people will buy a defibrillator. But I think it's unlikely to happen before then.
Okay. Something I've thought about, because I'm a little bit paranoid about things that might happen to me or in my home, is perhaps keeping my local neighbours' telephone numbers, most of which I know the people reasonably well, in my phone, so I'm not scratched if something did happen. And I did want to have my husband pass out on me. It wasn't a cardiac arrest or anything, but then just to have somebody's phone number at hand, other than a 999, for them to go and help and get help. And that's something I think perhaps more people, just think what would you need at that moment when that worst thing can happen. And I've done that now. I've put those numbers in my phone.
Yeah. It's also what would happen if it was you and somebody came along,
Yes.
a member of the public. So there's a few different things that are in place, really. You've got ICE that people will put in their phones in case of emergency. So in their contacts, they'll call them ICE Mum, ICE Bobby, whatever it may be, sort of thing. There's an app called What 3 Words. I don't know if you've heard of that. Now, What 3 Words, it's a free app to download, and it gives you 3 words, for example, worm.curtain.table, and those 3 words will be specific to where you are within 3 metres. So in another 3 metres time, there'll be a different 3 words. So it might be cattle.rug.box. And every single part of the world is mapped out to within 3 miles. And a good thing
I have heard about this.
Yeah.
I have heard about it. There was somebody recently rescued.
There you go.
I can't remember. It was somebody on a mountain or something.
Yeah.
And they found him using that, which I thought was just absolutely amazing.
In West Midlands and Warwickshire, all of our emergency services use that. Which is quite amazing as well. So having that is quite useful. And also things like, for example, I'm on an iPhone and there's an emergency contacts system that you can have. And if you then press your side button 5 times, it will phone all of those people that you have got set up as your emergency people. It will also send them a photo where you are and an audio clip as well. So actually then you have got people who can come to find you. It might be, if you do it a bit more like you said, that you have a WhatsApp group because maybe, say, for example, someone lives on their own or they're vulnerable, and then they would just need to post one message to that WhatsApp group, and then they would actually be able to know that there's something wrong. So yeah, I highly recommend putting things in place. I live on my own, and I've got also 5 people that can trace where I am at any one time. They're obviously people I trust very well because I think that why not make myself as safe as possible?
Well, exactly. I know a lot of us do live in this bubble, literally, where we think it's not going to happen to us until, unfortunately, the time that it does, and then it's better to be prepared. This is not a huge undertaking, is it, to make sure that you've got the numbers or you've got that system or those apps on your phone, and that you've actually got yourself a little bit of training, because it isn't, from what you've shown us, it really isn't that complicated.
No.
But in that situation, you do need to know what you're doing, and just getting yourself trained either online or under normal circumstances, probably first aid course wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, but you know what? First aid is so common sense, it really is. And there'll be people going, oh, they've got common sense. Yeah, they have usually. To be honest, anything that we do to someone who's not breathing or unconscious, usually we're helping them because our logic kicks in and we will do something to help. And also the emergency services, they will talk you through everything as well. So they will be on the line, they will stay with you, they'll tell you exactly what to do. So it's something to try not to be scared of, and it's basically having confidence really more than anything.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Becki. That has been really invaluable, and I do implore everybody to take Becki's knowledge and advice and just spend a little bit of time putting some of these little things in place. And hopefully you'll never ever need to use them, but in the really sad event that you do, you will be so pleased that you just took what is probably just a few minutes really of your life to help probably save another life. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Stay safe, everyone.